Time for a visit from our good friend Rekha Basu from the Des Moines Register. I wonder what Rekha is going to be talking about today.
Do you really? Do you wonder? Is there any question?
Well, this is very interesting. Of course, we're going to be talking about Baltimore, but you had an opportunity to go down to Ferguson.
Yes, I did.
When that was all going on. So you kind of have an interesting perspective of what's happening right now.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely. I mean, when I was at Ferguson, I saw peaceful protesters who turned out every night and did everything by the rules, and they simply marched and had signs and chanted slogans, but they were, they were obviously law-abiding and respectful. But then there were some kind of rogue elements who were getting a little carried away. And what was interesting is, these peaceful protesters would put themselves between those people and the police to sort of calm them down. And I think the same thing is playing out here in Baltimore. But what I want to say,
I've seen a picture showing just that.
That happened last night. Yeah,
that happened last night, and it's been happening. But I have to say that I'm a little bit sort of leery of the way in which this whole conflict and this rioting has been framed, and that has been to make it appear as if there's the good side and the bad side.
Right.
And the rioters are just total, what's the word, thugs who have no purpose and are just opportunistically taking advantage of the opportunity to pillage and loot and whatnot.
What else would you call lighting cars on fire in the middle of the street?
Oh, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But the point is, even as I tried to say in my column today, even rioters have a reason for rioting. And until we understand what that reason is and do something to rout out the incredible sense of disenfranchisement and malaise that's going on there, we're not going to get anywhere. No number of National Guard troops or law enforcement
They have a reason to riot, but they don't have the right to riot.
No, of course not. They should be arrested. They should be punished. There's no justification for it at all.
No.
But we need to understand what is driving it. When someone feels so little sense of investment in their own city, in the well-being of their own community, then obviously they don't feel like they really belong in that community. They don't feel like they have anything to lose. And fact is, in this part of West Baltimore, poverty is 1 in 3, is 30%. Joblessness is just out of sight.
Right.
And the city has neglected these parts of town for a really long time. Even playgrounds and basketball courts and things that should have been fixed have been standing there broken for 10 years. And people and then on top of that, a lot of these younger African American men are being constantly harassed by the police, at least to hear them tell it. And quite frankly, as we've been seeing around the country, this is not, this is all of a sudden, the mainstream population is becoming aware of it because of these cell phone cameras and other kinds of video cameras. There was the case in South Carolina where a man, right, remember that happened just recently, was shot in the back while he was walking away or running away. And this fellow, Freddie Gray, I mean, what was he doing? He had the temerity to look at a female lieutenant, police lieutenant, and then he started to run, and they chased him, and he was in custody, and all of a sudden, he's dead, after 80% of his spine.
Arrest record, but he didn't deserve to have his spine broken.
And that's the thing, I mean, yes, if there aren't jobs, and if there is no sense of hope, then what do you have to lose from breaking the law? And there is a lot of, law breaking going on right now because people don't feel represented, and they don't feel like they have a voice. And again, this is not to justify it, but officials need to start looking at that. And I want to say one of the best analyses of what's going on there came, of all people, from the chief operating officer of the Baltimore Orioles, who had, when there was some sports radio talk host getting upset on the air about Camden Yards being closed.
Today's game against the White Sox, which is about 1 o'clock Iowa time, the game's going to be played, but the gates are going to be locked.
No spectators, right, exactly. And then previously, I guess a few days ago, there was, that some of the gates were closed because of protesters blocking it. And so this, this talk radio host was getting upset about that. And what this fellow, who's the CEO of the Orioles, responded, and this is a rather long quote, but I want to read it to you because I think it says so much. So he said, and his name is, by the way, John Angelos, and he's the son of the team's owner.
Right.
And he, as I wrote, connected the dots to what's going on in a way that I haven't heard anyone else do. And he said, "My greater source of personal concern, outrage, and sympathy beyond this particular case is focused neither upon one night's property damage nor upon the acts." He said, It is focused rather upon the past 4-decade period during which an American political elite have shipped middle-class jobs and working-class jobs away from Baltimore and cities and towns around the U.S. to third-world dictatorships like China and others, plunged tens of millions of good, hardworking Americans into economic devastation, and then followed that action around the nation by diminishing every American's civil rights protections in order to control an unfairly impoverished population living under an ever-declining standard of living and suffering at the butt end of an ever more militarized and aggressive surveillance state.
So he's saying there's other issues here we need to be dealing with than
Exactly.
gentleman that never should have lost his life.
Exactly, exactly. And this is, I mean, I think it's very profound because he is connecting the dots to the economic, disenfranchisement that people feel. And again, these are poor people, They live on the poor side of town. They don't have any hope. They don't have jobs. They have prison records, ironically, because, as one critic who used to be the city council president in Baltimore framed it, the Martin OMalley, who is a potential candidate for president on the Democratic side, right? He's challenging Hillary Clinton as a progressive. When he was governor and also the mayor of Baltimore, and this is about 15 years ago, he instituted this zero tolerance policy for crime. And what that did was, and it was an effort to sort of clear up lawlessness on the streets, but really little things like littering or loitering could become offenses that would land a person in jail. And so all of a sudden, people who had no jobs became criminals, and then they couldn't get jobs, and then, they had a police record, and then they're targeted by police. So it's just it's a perfect storm of things. And, I guess all I'm saying is people wake up, look at what's going on, look at what is underneath all of this. It's a real problem. It's happening across American cities, and then people who are already struggling to make it feel like they have to justify their very existence on the streets or driving a car in the wrong neighborhood and they're pulled over, and then suddenly they end up dead or in handcuffs or they're walking or.
Well, and this is in a city that has had Democrats in power for 20 years. So what is the answer? What do we do?
What is the answer? We create more jobs and more opportunities. And this is something also that really riles me. If you take a look at the presidential candidates who have been coming through Iowa, nobody is talking about poverty. Nobody's talking about, or very, very few people are. Bernie Sanders is, okay? But, all of a sudden it's about sort of, a war on religion or a war on this or that, and it's same-sex marriage, and nobody is really looking at what has happened to the American poor. And when they talk about, making things better, it's always middle class, middle class, middle class. What about the poor? Nobody's thinking about them. We need to change our economic policies. We need to invest way more into cities and into infrastructure. We need to make it possible for more people to go to college so that they can get a better education. We need criminal justice reform. I mean, when such a high proportion of one population, of the black population, is in prison, what hope is there? There are just so many issues here that people are ignoring. And even our trade treaties, why are we opening these free trade agreements with countries that are exploitative, of their own workers, when it is only to make the corporate profits go up for CEOs, and yet the people here at this end are out of work, are put out of work because of it. There's so much to
And
this.
we can learn more in today's paper.
Check it out.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
All right.
Reasons
Thank
behind
you.
the riot.
And you were talking about Ferguson. Now there's a civil trial, and I would, if I had to put money on it, I would bet that that's not going to go favorably, and I'll bet you we have riots again down there. I mean, this scenario is going to continue over and over and over.
There are so many cases in which, even though a police officer was not criminally found culpable in a civil suit, injuries, damages are won by the grieving party because they were found to be at fault.
All right, it's 8:51. We'll be right back. You're watching.